Ghosts of recent meals still hung in the heavy air, tantalizing little aromas that were just enough to remind me how hungry I was, but not enough to let me figure out what it was I was smelling. Sweet and sour chicken or mugu gai pan? I stood there, wishing I could have gotten takeout, when a pickup truck pulled to the curb and the passenger side window rolled down. "Hey, you!" I instantly switched to professional mode. If this guy was looking for a quickie, I would surreptitiously lead him away where Buddy could bust him for solicitation. But if he was our man... Cautiously, I walked over to the vehicle, careful to remain just out of reach, should the suspect try to take a grab at me. "Yeah, what's your problem, honey?" He was a young man, possibly a college student. He wore a windbreaker over a t-shirt and dark pants, no hat, dark curling hair down to his shoulders. Quite good looking. I peered into the cab and tried to get a solid description of him. "I'm looking for Claudine Street. Can you help me?" "You're 2 blocks away," I instructed him, pointing a finger east. "Keep going in the direction you're headed. Turn left at the intersection. 2 lights over is Claudine." "Thanks." He grinned and gunned his motor and took off. I watched him leave, my senses still tingling. I was unable to tell if this encounter had ended or if it was the preamble to a return engagement. That was one thing you couldn't predict. Sometimes the most harmless-looking person with the most innocent-sounding excuse could turn out to be a vicious serial killer. The signal to let Buddy know all was clear was to put my hands on my hips. Instead, I crossed my arms, still staring at the retreating taillights. Something was wrong. Something was hanging at an odd angle, and it gnawed at me. When that feeling comes over you, you know, the one that sends a tingle up your spine and rings bells in your head, but you can't exactly put your finger on what it was that triggered the alarm. The irritation grows like an itch you can't reach to scratch. And for a cop, that itch could mean the difference between life and death. I was getting that feeling big time, but I couldn't understand why. The only thing I was sure of was that the kid in the truck was not the cause. "Something is out of focus here," I said. "There's something rotten in the state of Denmark, and I do mean rotten." I started to walk back toward Biltmore when the wind kicked up again, throwing my hair across my face and lifting my skirts. Normally, I wore my hair in a braid or bun at the back of my neck. For this job, however, I had to let the locks fall loose. Quickly, I brushed back the Irish red curls, knowing there'd be hell to pay to get the tangles out later. A low moan howled from down the alley, coming from the direction taken by the little Chinese woman a few minutes earlier. I could still smell the remains of whatever had been cooking that day, mixed with the scent of ozone and impending rain. Overhead, the clouds were slowly growing closer and thicker. More wind picked up, moaning again. "Oh, Jesus!" I bolted down the alleyway. My police issue was in my hand as if by magic. "Code 3! Code 3! Buddy!" Chin Ho Chi was no more than 100 feet from the street, tucked into a narrow space between the buildings. She looked like she had taken a moment to crawl up on top of some piled-up boxes for a quick break. Her eyes were half closed. Her hands lay limply in her lap. With the exception of her jawbone dangling on its hinges, the lower half of her face was completely missing. Blood dribbled like a leaky water faucet over her already soaked blouse. Hesitantly, I reached up, pressing 2 fingers against her jugular to confirm death, when she suddenly shuddered. Slowly, her eyes rolled around until they found me. Her hands trembled as she tried to raise them. Then, as though a switch had been flipped, the light went out in her eyes, and her hands dropped lifeless back into her lap. I heard a scream coming from somewhere. It was later I realized the sound had come from me.